All right, good day, everybody. If you're just joining in here, I'd just like to start by introducing myself here. My name is John Slippick. I'm an applications engineer here at Hawkrig Systems and also our DriveWorks specialist. I'd also like to introduce you to Tom Wormald, Senior Technical Specialist at DriveWorks. He's going to be co-presenting with me today.
Hi, guys.
And we're here to talk to you today about how to free up your time with DriveWorks automation. So let me just get started here now. All right, before I even really get into any of the presentation here, first thing I want to talk about is just the chat UI. You should know a little bit about this by now. I've been in a few sessions very likely, but remember you're gonna have to minimize your screen a bit if you want to see the chat UI. We've launched a few polls to begin with here. So if you want to respond to those and also get interactive in the chat, we do have the chat moderator in here as well. Rani Gudoy from Hawkrig Systems is moderating the chat for us. So you'll be able to answer all of your questions, but please don't hesitate at any point to speak up and ask questions. So let's start with a little bit of a story, if you will, here. So here's a scenario. You're a conveyor system manufacturer. All right, your customer is pretty much other manufacturers and other industries like food distribution, any kind of a distribution handling system. Basically, anybody that needs to move stuff around is who you sell to. But because of COVID, we're all kind of weathering a bit of a storm right now. A lot of people that had projects in these industries, everybody's been working from home. So a lot of projects, expansions, that sort of been put on hold. And nobody really wants to pull the trigger on these sales at this point. So again, just like everybody else, we're all having a hard time surviving right now. So you need to become a little bit more competitive. It's something you've probably been thinking about for a while anyways, with all these people working from home. Let's start talking about automating things. So we've identified two main things that we can use here to become a bit more competitive. We want to increase the amount of orders that are coming through. We figure we can probably do that by automating our quotations. Right now, our quotations are done a bit of old-fashioned way. It takes about 3 to 4 days to do a quote. Requires either fax, email, or phoning somebody up. And there's a lot of resources that go into collecting developing those quotations. Even some engineering time is sometimes required in order to get an accurate price. Make sure we're not losing money. We'd also, while we're at it, maybe get some order entry happening over the web. Nice 3D user interface. Maybe let's let somebody have a 3D model to be able to play around with things. At that point, we're kind of talking about a marketing tool at the same time. Now, secondly, we like to reduce our engineering design hours. And we figure that we can, by doing that, we'll be able to automate some modeling and drafting. When orders come through, a lot of engineering hours are required. On these conveyors, let's say there's, 20 to 30 hours of engineering time that's required to produce drawings on a conveyor. So we like to kind of automate that because our engineers are not doing the types of things that engineers really like to do and what they're good at. Improving designs, doing optimizations, cost reductions, that sort of thing. So we like to let them do that a bit. So we're going to talk about automating things with DriveWorks. Now, DriveWorks is a tool that we can use here. It's a configurator for desktop, mobile, and tablet. Okay, so that basically means that we can use DriveWorks anywhere from any type of technology for the most part, whether that's your mobile device, a desktop, tablet. Now, it's a tool that's used by many walks of life. It's not only just used by engineers, it's also used by sales teams, distributors. Remember, again, there's the end customers we were talking about, them being able to enter things in there. And it's automation that's meant for everybody. Depending on what you want to do with it, you can have it target any one of these audiences. I always like to say that DriveWorks is automation for things that are the same, but they're different. And what that really means is, again, our situation today is we're designing conveyor belts. And those conveyor belts, they come in not just belts, conveyor systems, they come in a length, a width, and a height. And there's some other things that go into it. But for the most part, that's what goes into these. So every time we spit out a new one, the conveyor basically looks the same. There's maybe the paint is different. There's a couple of options that are changed. But for the most part, they all look the same. That's what we mean by the same, but they're different. Now with this, we can automate the creation of various types of things. We can do manufacturing documents, SOLIDWORKS data, so parts, assemblies, and drawings. That's kind of the main thing that everybody sees about DriveWorks when they first learn about it, is the SOLIDWORKS side of it. But let's talk about how we would run our configurator. So to run your configurator, you start by filling out a number of forms. In this case here, there's actually 5 forms that have been set up in this automation project. And each one of these forms has been built completely custom by the person that built the automation. So if you need 5 forms, that's great. If you only need 3, that's fine. But the end user fills out the forms, and then the result is models. So we can see here we get SOLIDWORKS parts, we get SOLIDWORKS assemblies. If you go into SOLIDWORKS and edit SOLIDWORKS part or an assembly and do a file save as, most of the file formats you see there is a format that we can save out with DriveWorks. So that includes Parasol, step files, and it happens completely in parallel with your SOLIDWORKS data. Now keep in mind too that we have full control over the file names. So each of these models here has a certain file name that's attached to it. You have full control over that. You can put it, just attach like an order number at the end of it, or you can completely rewrite the file name and use intelligent file naming. Now the secondary result is drawings, of course. So DWGs, PDFs, SOLIDWORKS drawings. You can do e-drawings. Once again, just like I said about the SOLIDWORKS parts, if you go and you do a file save as and a drawing, pretty much most of those formats in there is a format that we can save with a drawing. And lastly, one of the lesser understood aspects of DriveWorks to new people approaching it is the documentation aspect. Now, right out of the gates, everybody's going to benefit from being able to develop a quotation and a bill of materials. Those are sort of the basic things that you can do with it. But once you get into the higher levels of DriveWorks with Professional, you can actually automate things like Excel documents. And the beautiful thing, once we get into automating Excel documents, pretty much all of the business world lives on some form of Excel and Word. And if we can start automating that, then we're not even we're talking about above and beyond model automation. You can automate anything if you kind of get into that level. Now, speaking of levels, there are 3 levels of DriveWorks that I want to talk about: Express, Solo, and Professional. Let's start with DriveWorks Express. You actually have access to this right now. Once we're done talking here today, the day's over, you can actually go in and use DriveWorks Express right within SOLIDWORKS. It's included in every seat. Now keep in mind, this is really meant to be entry-level automation. I always kind of call it the free carrot, if you will. You know, it's enough to get your feet wet, enough to get an introduction to some real automation. But once you get to a certain point, you're probably going to realize that I think I want a little bit more. And once you want a little bit more, we have to talk about the first paid version of DriveWorks, and that is DriveWorks Solo. There is a significant amount of things that get added going from Express to Solo, including a rules builder. There's a full form designer, lots of different documentation you can create. The main thing, though, that I want you to get out of this is that there is a 30-day free trial. And we will post the link to this at the end of it, by the way, this 30-day free trial. But you can start using it free. Now, one of the things I should mention about DriveWorks at this point too is that between all 3 levels, DriveWorks is a scalable product. And what that means is that when you start with an Express project and then you later on decide you want to go solo, well, you can just upgrade that project and bring it into solo, no problem. Now, once you want even more, then we have to talk about DriveWorks Pro. Now, DriveWorks Pro really takes DriveWorks Solo and it sort of ups it to the enterprise level, we would call it. So DriveWorks Solo is primarily a tool to automate the engineering department, is kind of the best way to put it. But once we go to Pro, the whole enterprise is we can automate, and that includes deployment, DriveWorks Live, DriveWorks User. I don't want to get into this too much because Tom is going to speak to you about DriveWorks Pro a little bit after here. Now, what I'm here to show you though is how easy it is to set up automation in DriveWorks. I'm going to be talking about DriveWorks Solo in particular when I get into this here, but there's 3 main steps or phases to every automation project, and it pretty much is always the same. Phase 1 is capturing what you can change. So this is capturing information in a SOLIDWORKS model. Phase 2 is developing user interface. And phase 3 is writing out the rules. Now, writing out the rules is taking phase 1 and phase 2 and basically merging them together really. Where it's kind of like wiring circuitry is what it is. You take what you captured, you take what you want how you want the user to interact, and you just wire them together. What you do. Now, so next thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually show you DriveWorks Solo in action here, and I kind of want to just show you how easy it is to set up some automation. So again, we're talking about our conveyor systems here, and DriveWorks Solo, it sits within SOLIDWORKS to begin with here, so it actually lives in the task pane on the right of the screen here. And we have a basic project that's already been set up here, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to open our conveyor model. Now let's just talk about this model a little bit to begin with here. So very basic, a roller conveyor. There's various things that change on this. There's a length, there's a width, there's a height. Those are the basics. There are a number of things that will change based on that too. So the number of rollers, as this conveyor gets longer, you'll want more rollers. There's a hole mounting pattern in these rails. That will need to be updated as this thing gets longer to keep up with the rollers. The most interesting part though is the support piece right here in the middle. That support piece isn't always required. We only really need that when the conveyor is over a certain length, and then it goes in there as support to kind of prop it up a bit. So we will need to account for that. Now keep in mind, you can use equations in SOLIDWORKS and design tables to do some of this stuff. The only thing though is that when you're developing equations, you're really developing a very fine parametric model is what you're doing. It's not really full automation. Okay, it's not going to be used to produce, unique file names and all that kind of stuff. And then on top of that, using DriveWorks for equations is going to make you far more efficient. It's just a far better tool at doing what it does. So what we need to do is we need to start by actually capturing this model here. So I'm going to capture the current model. And what we're going to do, I always like to say when we start an automation project is you want to start with baby steps. And what that means is when you look at the end of an automation project, it seems complicated, but all you need to do is start with just a couple of things. So we're just going to start by automating the length of this and the width. And we're not even going to worry about this top piece, the conveyor bed. I'm going to suppress it for now so it's not in front of us. It will pop up again later on. So all I'm going to capture is the conveyor frame and the pieces underneath it. So I actually check on those models there to capture those. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the conveyor frame and we're going to capture some of the dimensions. Now this center piece here, that support, there is a mate that governs that. So I'm going to go to this this dimension right over here, and we're going to go over on the right, and we're going to call this half length. Okay, so that's going to be the half length. I'm going to close this model because I don't really need it anymore. And then we're going to go into the next piece. So the next piece we need to capture things for is the frame. Same idea, I'm going to load into there. Now this frame is very similar, except there's a width. That I'm going to call half width. And then we have one other thing, there's a length. And we're going to call that length. So I've captured some dimensions. Keep in mind, you can also capture features. So for example, the holes in the feet here, maybe you want an option to not have those on. You can capture those features and just turn them off and on. We can also capture custom properties. So part number, description. There's some other things down here, replacement models, drawings, file formats. There's a lot of different things we can capture with DriveWorks Solo. So let's close this model. And let's just go and talk about our last one here. So we got the support piece. Technically, you'd want to come in here and capture some things, but we're not ready to automate our height yet. Remember, we're just taking a look at the length and the width, not the height at this point. So let's kind of leave that for now. We're going to close this, and I'm going to hit save here. And what we're going to do next, so that's phase one of the process, capturing our information. Phase two is kind of a segue into showing you what's called the project designer. Now, the project designer is it's a window on its own, more or less here that kind of pops up here. And this window is the DriveWorks Solo interface. Now, there's a bunch of tasks we can access here, but we're just going to look at the form design portion of this here. And under the form design, this is where phase two happens. This is where you actually develop your user interface. Now, for me, this is kind of the fun part of it because this is where it gets really creative. Okay, and what I mean by that is your form, it can be as basic, as rudimentary, as you want it to be. If it's just meant to automate the engineering department, it doesn't need to be that complicated. However, if your end goal is to put this on the web and you're using it as a marketing tool, you do want to put a bit of effort into this and make it look nice. So that's kind of where, again, where I say the creative part of this comes into play. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to throw on a couple of controls just to show you how easy this is to set up. I'm going to put on what's called a numeric text box, and this is going to be called conveyor width is the name I'm going to give it. And that goes onto my form here. I can move it around. I can stretch it out a bit if I want. But one of the things about a numeric text box that makes your life a bit easier with DriveWorks is that it actually allows you to restrict data entry into here. And what I mean is I can go off to the right here and I can put a minimum of 400 and I can say a maximum of 1,000. And now you see right away the value goes up to 400. I can only enter in values between those two. Let's put another control in here. This is going to be a conveyor length, if I can spell that right, conveyor length. Now the conveyor length, I love this control because first of all, it looks pretty, but second of all, it also reacts like a numeric text box, and that it operates between a minimum and a maximum value. So I'm going to go in and do that. I'm going to put my minimum on this one up a little bit more, and I'll say we'll go up to 3,000, and we can put an increment value on this. And if I go and I test this out, nice thing about the slider, again, I can move this back and forth, and that looks great. It's very slick UI, but the only problem I ever have with the slider control is what value is it's reporting? Is that 2,500? Is it 2,525? Is that 900? I don't really know. That's kind of the problem. It looks great, but you need to do a little bit of something extra to really kind of see that value. So this is kind of a good segue to show you how easy it is to build rules in DriveWorks. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to report this value back. And this is going to open the rule builder. This is one of the core features of DriveWorks Solo, is the rule builder interface that pops up here. And this is going to help you to write all your rules in a very easy way. Now, one of the things about building rules in DriveWorks is that it's not meant to feel like you're writing Visual Basic code. It feels more like you're writing Excel formulas is the way that this works here. It's very easy to work with. You sort of add everything on one kind of chain of commands here. So I'm just going to put an equal, and I'm going to say conveyor length. That's going to be the value, and we're just going to put our units after that. And if I OK that, and I go and I test this out, you can see here my conveyor length, I can change that, but I can actually see the value being reported up into there now. So now it's not only does it look great, but it's also functional. So that's phase 2 of the process. Again, phase 1, we captured information. Phase 2, we developed a UI. Phase 3, let's build some model rules, and we'll kind of tie the two of these phases together. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to add the conveyor assembly onto here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select everything. And let me just sort this here. And I'm going to talk about the types of rules we can build here when it comes to model rules. First of all, there's configuration rules, so you can control configurations. Those properties we capture, they show up right here. So I can write rules for those. Most important to us here, what I'm going to show you is those dimensional data. Those show up right over here. But then finally, I can also control the file names right here. We're going to want to control that support member here. And then I also have some folders that we can change. Let's start really simple. I'm going to start by writing a rule for the length. So I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to just go to the right of the screen here and double click on it. This is where my controls are. So that conveyor length control, I just double left click on it. I hit OK, and there's my first model rule, really. Let's go to the half width. This one is slightly more involved. I want the conveyor width, but I'm going to divide that in half. Finally, the half length. For this one, let's pull this over. For the half length, I'm going to put in the conveyor length, and I'm going to subtract the value, and then I'm also going to divide that. So you can do math at this point. And again, the idea with building rules in DriveWorks, it's going to make your life a lot easier, is the whole idea that it's more of an Excel-based system. Even if I just go up to the functions here, just to show you, I've got a list of functions I can use in DriveWorks. So as a beginner, getting in to use this, it's a lot like working with Excel for the first time. It's really gonna kind of help you out. Okay, so we have our dimensions. Those are all being driven. Now, the next thing I want to do here is I want to go into the support member. And all I want to do for this, for the support member, is we need to put some logic in here. Remember that the support member is not always being used. So I'm going to say if the conveyor length is greater than, I don't know, 1500, then build the file. Otherwise, we delete it. Simple as that. If I don't need it, I delete it. We'll OK on this. Now, there is a lot of other things we'd want to do. You know, we've got a couple other file names you want to build. You got these properties, but we're going to move along to the next bit here. Now, we're pretty much done phase 3, but I just want to show you quickly here. We can also automate documents in DriveWorks Solo. If I go into here, this is where you can do your BOM documents, your quotations. You can do a cover letter. These are really meant to get you up and running really quickly with DriveWorks automation. They're going to do a really good job at that. Get you up and running fast and get your quotations out the door here. Now, again, we're done phase 3 of that process. So I'm going to close this. And what we're going to do next is I'm going to show you, let's just close this model here. I'm not going to save that. There's sort of an unwritten 4th phase that I always like to talk about here, and that is testing and validation. You always need to do this, and that's why we're starting small here. Remember, we only start with a few dimensions. We want to run it through the whole process. We want to test it. We want to make sure that's working. When it's working, we get success, we get validation, we get some confidence. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the run button. And you can see here my UI shows up on the right of the screen here. I can put in a value of 500 for that conveyor width. Remember, if I put in a value greater than 1,000, it comes back down a bit, right? So let's put that to 700. Let's keep the conveyor length down a little bit. I'll keep it below that 1,500. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit preview up at the top here. So this is going to show us a preview on screen here. And we can see that, again, we didn't automate the top piece of it, so it does look funny. But we can see, you know, the length changed and the width, and that support member on the bottom piece, it isn't there. Let's test the other condition where the length is over 1,500. We'll preview it again. And this time you see that actually pops up in there. So again, very easy. You know, we started small. We started with a couple of things. Now, if you actually want to commit your files into Windows at this point, you just hit finish, and it would actually generate this documentation. And this should pop open in a second here. It's on my other screen. Let me pull this over. So what I get here is the files that were actually committed to disk. So the assembly files, the models. What I want to draw attention to is there's these reports in here. This is another thing about DriveWorks that makes it a lot easier to use, because this report is going to draw attention to any errors that pop up. So again, you're trying to validate your rules. Just know that the system is going to help you to try to locate any issues that you do run into. Now, lastly, just to sort of reiterate, the way that you do this build automation with DriveWorks is you start small, you run through all those phases, and then you add more. So let's just say theoretically here, you've done that. You know, you've gone and you spent some good amount of time developing this project, and you added a whole bunch more things into it. And now your project is at kind of a higher level now. So if I go and I run this project here, you can see that this is kind of a UI that you could eventually get here. You know, there's this nice background image. There's a very beautiful image of the conveyor itself down here. I got some customer information, and then I have multiple forms. You know, I can hit next on the bottom, and then I've got other conveyors that pop up in here. I can have multiple ones. You know, I can have up to 5. I can do a curved conveyor next, and you can see, I mean, I think you get the picture that this has gotten very complicated at this point, but it doesn't have to feel complicated because we only started with a couple of things, and that is it. Okay, so I sort of pose a question now. You know, what if you did want to go to DriveWorks Pro? Let's take a look at DriveWorks Pro, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn the floor over to Tom at this point. So let me just get the screen over to him here, and he is going to show you about DriveWorks Pro.
So I'm going to build on what John has just been talking on, but we're going to look at DriveWorks Pro now. So if you remember right back to when John was talking about the different levels of DriveWorks, DriveWorks Pro is the 3rd and kind of top tier automation tool. We're going to focus on, I suppose, what things in DriveWorks Pro build on Solo, but also what new things are available to us in DriveWorks Pro. And John has touched on a few of them when he kind of went through the introduction to DriveWorks at the beginning. So first of all, DriveWorks Pro kind of takes the design automation that's available in DriveWorks Solo and DriveWorks Express and really takes it to the next level. We get a lot more control over things like our SolidWorks drawings, and we also get access to something that we call generation tasks. So generation tasks essentially allow us to do more during the generation of our SolidWorks models. So when DriveWorks is automating new designs, we can run these additional tasks that essentially allow us to do just more automation. So this might be things like creating new mates, creating new configurations, inserting new parts into assemblies. It really takes what you can do in Xpress and DriveWorks Solo and really builds on that and takes it to the next level. So another big thing that DriveWorks Pro brings us is this idea of being a complete CPQ sales configurator. So rather than your configurator being a tool that you run from inside SolidWorks and from within the SolidWorks task pane, like John was just showing then, we have the ability to run our configurator from outside of SolidWorks. And we can build a really intuitive and dynamic user interface because we get access to more advanced form controls. So we can do things like create macro buttons, create 3D previews, view videos in our forms if we need that. So essentially, you can really take the sort of form design to the next level as well. And the final thing that kind of Pro, I suppose, does over Solo is it allows us to configure anywhere on any device. So again, going back to this idea that Solo is a sort of engineering tool that you run from inside SolidWorks and you need a seat of SolidWorks to use, DriveWorks Pro gives us the ability to run our configurators from a web browser. So any device that can access a web browser, you can therefore then run your configurator from. So this might be a phone, it might be a tablet, it might even be a VR headset. So DriveWorks has some VR technology, which I'll get onto in a second. And because all of our technology is browser-based, most VR headsets have a browser, and it doesn't have to be a VR headset, it could be a Google Cardboard or something like that. And you can access your configurator from these headsets. And this idea allows us to move your configurator and move your automation from not just being within the engineering department, but also allowing your kind of sales departments and other areas of your business to really allow themselves to be automated as well. So one of the things we talk about a lot when we're talking about the functionality of DriveWorks Pro and what is available is we talk about our technology stack. So our technology stack is essentially the 7 areas that make up DriveWorks technology. And this might not cover every single tiny little thing that you can do, but it goes pretty much all of the way there. And we actually have some technology stack demonstrations that are online and publicly available, which when I get on to show you an example of a DriveWorks Pro configurator, I'll point you to where they are as well. So I'm going to go through each of them 7 tech stack areas now and just explain a little bit more about what it is and what functionality it brings you to build into your configurators. So the first 3, starting with the rules engine inside DriveWorks Pro, are very similar to the 3 sort of steps that John mentioned when he was talking about how you go about building a configurator. So the rules engine is essentially what in the background powers everything inside of DriveWorks. So pretty much everything that you would do inside of DriveWorks is done using a rule. And our rules engine is what essentially is calculating everything as you're running your configurator. So if you have a rule to hide or show a control on your form, it's the rules engine in the background that is calculating that rule and hiding and showing that control when it's needed. If you have a rule that drives a feature to be suppressed or unsuppressed, again, it's the rules engine in the background that's really doing all that powerful calculations. And there are lots of different types of rules in DriveWorks. the rules tech stack that we have goes into a lot more detail about the different types of rules that you can build into your configurator. So obviously in John's demonstration then, he was focusing very much on the SOLIDWORKS automation that's available in DriveWorks Solar. And all of that automation is also available inside of DriveWorks Pro. But as I mentioned a second ago, Pro really takes it sort of that next level as well. DriveWorks only automates SOLIDWORKS. We chose to automate SOLIDWORKS because we wanted to be as good as we can be at automating SOLIDWORKS. So we chose to kind of focus on automating just SOLIDWORKS. And we want to be the best in the world at it, and you know, we believe we are. So the third tech stack is our form design technology, and again, this is something that John covered quite a lot in his demonstration of DriveWorks Solar. But again, DriveWorks Pro really takes the form design to the next level. So as I said, you get the ability to add macro buttons, 3D previews, things like that to your form to make something that you might want to allow your customers to access. The configurator that John showed in the task pane, the conveyor example, that looked really nice, and you can build that kind of stuff and make it available on your website using DriveWorks Pro. So it says here, quickly publish to the web, and you don't need to know how to code to be able to take what you've designed in your form designer and put it on a web browser. DriveWorks does all that kind of conversion for you and allows you to design something using the form designer and quickly and easily show it in a web browser. The fourth tech stack, and we're getting onto the stuff here now that isn't available in DriveWorks Solar. So one of the things that DriveWorks Pro allows you to do, because we're kind of moving away from this being solely an engineering tool, is it allows us to create a workflow. And this workflow is sort of like the workflow for your orders, your quotations, for your custom products. So we often talk about the who, the what, and the when. The who being who can perform a particular task or transition from one state in your workflow to another state. The what is obviously what's going to go on in that workflow. It's okay just being able to kind of move between 2 points, but you might want things to happen when you run a particular transition. So when you move from one state to another, you may want a quotation to get generated at that point. When your engineer may have come in and approved a quotation, you then may want your SOLIDWORKS data to be generated. So that is the what, and then the when is when that actually happens. At what point in your flow does then tasks happen? So the workflow technology that we have inside of DriveWorks is covered by something called specification flow and specification macros. They're the things that allow us to control this workflow. So one of the other major areas of DriveWorks' technology, and this sort of comes into the form design a little bit, is our 3D technology. So more and more, especially with custom products, people need to and want to be able to see what they're configuring as they're configuring it. I'm sure most people in this presentation listening now have been on some form of 3D configurator. They'll have bought a product online that had some kind of visual representation, whether that be a car, whether that be a pair of trainers on Nike ID. But having that sort of visual representation of what you're configuring really helps in terms of aiding the configuration process. In terms of, for you as the kind of seller of the product, it's going to help you generate more sales, because if someone can see what they're doing and see what they're configuring, they're way more likely to buy that product. And it's not just a kind of consumer more likely to buy sort of thing with the 3D. It's also about aiding the configuration experience. So if a sales guy is running through and creating a new configurable order, if he can kind of see what options he's choosing and then spot a mistake by seeing it in the 3D, again, that's going to reduce the amount of mistakes in quoting and things like that. So you can spot that thing way earlier than you would do if all of them SOLIDWORKS designs have been created by an engineer. And at that point, you then went, oh, wait a minute, you know, that configuration isn't quite right. So something else in our technology stack that is becoming more and more important is the ability to integrate DriveWorks with other systems. So DriveWorks is, as we've been talking about, a configuration tool and a way of building a configurator, but quite often you may want to send data from that configurator to other systems. So we have out-of-the-box integrations with things like SolidWorks CAM, with PhotoView 360, with SolidWorks PDM. But we also have lots of technology within DriveWorks Pro that allow you to create your own integrations with your own systems. So that might be sending BOM data to an ERP system, or account data and contact data to a CRM system, and vice versa. So it's not just about sending data from DriveWorks to another system, it's also about being able to sort of feed DriveWorks with data from your company systems. And as I said, we put a lot of functionality inside the software, inside of DriveWorks Pro, to allow you to create these integrations easily. And then finally, again, something that John touched on in Solo, and this is something that really Pro builds on again, is this ability to troubleshoot and report on what your configurator is doing. So John showed right at the end of his section the model report that was generated at the end. When he went and actually generated a new specification, he got this report that told him everything that DriveWorks had done. Now, this is great because obviously you can troubleshoot issues that you're having, you can see any errors that you're receiving, but it's also good to just get some information about what DriveWorks is actually doing. And in Pro, we have loads of other tools to help you when you're developing and actually creating your configurators. So we have tools for step-by-step walking through the model generation that DriveWorks is doing, and you can pause it at certain points and things like that. And we also have ways of kind of doing the same thing, but for your actual configurator kind of front end as well. So one of the things that we say at DriveWorks is we want the configuration experience and the administration experience to be as easy as possible. And putting these reporting and troubleshooting tools into the software means that you guys can actually, go away and create your own configurators yourself. As John was saying, the sort of rules building experience is kind of Excel syntax based. So you can really get stuck in and get creating your own configurators for your own products. So that is our tech stack. They're the 7 areas that I guess make up DriveWorks Pro. And each area obviously has lots of individual bits of functionality that kind of go into it to allow you to create a configurator. So I'm going to show you a finished example of a configurator that kind of shows off quite a few of these different tech stack areas. And the example I'm going to use is our scissor lift demo. So this is our demo site, and this is completely public and available to you guys. So after this presentation, feel free to head to driveworkslive.com. And on here, we have a whole load of different demonstrations for DriveWorks Pro. So at the top here, we have some kind of embedded configurator examples. And these are simple configurators that kind of show off how you can integrate a DriveWorks configurator into your website. But the ones I'm going to be using are these ones down here. And these are our industry examples. And you can see that we've got lots of different kind of industry examples here. And the reason why we have all of these demonstrations is because DriveWorks isn't designed for a particular industry. It's a very generic piece of software. And as John said, if you design same but different products, configurable products, then DriveWorks is for you. And that's why we have all these different industry demos to kind of show off how DriveWorks can be used in all of these different industries. So as I said, the demo that I'm going to show you is this scissor lift demo here. And if I click try example, what this is going to do is this is now taking us to the actual DriveWorks configurator itself. So everything that you're seeing on screen from this point onwards has been designed using the form design technology that John showed in his demonstration. Now, I'll show you in a second a little bit what it looks like in DriveWorks Pro. So this is just to give you a rundown. On all of our demos, we have this kind of intro screen to sort of explain what that demo shows. So we're going to select English as our language, and this is just to show off that you can build rules that actually, determine the language of your forms. So this is our scissor lift example, and you can see we've got straight away we've got this nice 3D preview, and we can interact with this preview and kind of move it around, spin it around, have a look at it. But as I pick different options on the right and configure this scissor lift, you'll see that the 3D updates in real time. So straight away, I can see that, you know, changing them options has kind of changed the size of my scissor lift. And I can go through using these sort of tabs at the top. And we have some form templates inside of DriveWorks, which allow you to build forms like this really quickly. And you can see that we can then pick different options for this conveyor and see it update. So the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed that down here on the right-hand side, we have a price. And this price is updating as I pick different options. So you notice if I pick a kind of smaller load, smaller capacity load, you'll notice that the price kind of decreases. And if I pick different options for the platform, again, you'll notice that this updates the price. So that price has just been calculated by a rule. So you can kind of just, depending on your company's rules and the logic that you use to price your configurable products, you can build them rules and that logic into your DriveWorks configurator so that you can calculate an accurate price. And you don't necessarily have to show that straight to the customer. You could have a quotation generated at the end that contains all that pricing information. So if we go right to the end of this demonstration and submit, what will happen now is I can enter my details, finish the specification, and all of the downstream sort of manufacturing data, quotations, and other sales documentation will then be automated by DriveWorks. We can then have that sent out to the correct people. We might send the quotation out to a sales guy. We might send the manufacturing information off to our engineering department, or we may just notify them people via an automatic email to kind of say your files are ready to be viewed. So I'll just quickly type in my information here, and we should. So I'm not sure what's happening here. I'm at home and my Wi-Fi isn't the fastest. So there we go. Perfect. So what's going to happen now is we'll start to see some images appear, and these images are all of the different models and parts and assemblies that DriveWorks is automatically creating us in the background. So all these images here, these are new parts that have been generated using the same techniques that John showed in his DriveWorks Solar demonstration. So they're all having their dimensions driven, their features driven, and all that kind of thing as well. If we were kind of waiting on here, oh, there we go, just as I said it, we'll start to get some manufacturing drawings generated, again, automatically via all the different rules that we've built in the background. So that's everything that I've got to show you guys today. As I said, from that DriveWorks Live website, you can access all of these different demonstrations, go have a go with them. If you scroll down a bit further, we have some information about our CPQ for manufacturing that is available with DriveWorks, and also a separate demo for each of the 7 technology stack areas that I mentioned earlier. So these really deep dive into what you can do with rules, what you can do with the 3D technology, what you can do with integration. So if there is a particular area that you're interested in, go have a look at that technology stack, and chances are it'll give you a lot of information about what DriveWorks can do. But essentially, the main thing to remember from this presentation is that DriveWorks is a completely scalable solution. So you can start with Xpress, which everyone in here that has SolidWorks has access to. You can move up to Solar, and you can start to get some of the benefits from that. You can have a go with the Solar free trial and learn the tool. And all the stuff that you're going to learn with DriveWorks Solar is then applicable to DriveWorks Pro. So if you did decide that you wanted to move up to something like DriveWorks Pro, all of the knowledge that you've learned and all the automation that you've done in Solo can be transferred straight into Pro, and all of the kind of the training and things like that you've done is completely applicable to Pro as well. So I hope that was useful. I'm seeing a few things in the chat that the audio isn't amazing, so hopefully it made sense. But I'm going to pass back over to John now so that he can just finish off the presentation.
Okay, so just a final few things to leave you with here. Kind of the whole point of this presentation is to just show you that you can start very, very basic. It's all about baby steps, especially if you don't have any kind of a background with automation like this before. Start with DriveWorks Express. You have access to it right now. So start with that, start playing around with it. If you find you've got a knack for it and you want to you get excited about doing some other things, then you can move up to DriveWorks Solo. Okay, everything I show you there's an actual rules builder. There's lots of different tools that you can use in it, but there's that 30-day free trial in particular. Okay, and actually we're gonna paste the link. I'm gonna paste the link to that right now in the chat. That's the link to the free trial. Put that right in there. And then I just kind of want to end with this final slide here. So first of all, I'm just going to wrap it up. Thanks for attending. If you have any further questions, if you wouldn't mind attending, there's a DriveWorks Expo booth. DriveWorks has actually, we wanted to thank them as well. They actually sponsored this presentation for us today. So they have a vendor booth set up on the Expo side. So you can find some of us there if you have any questions. And also immediately after this session, there is a DriveWorks networking session. And you can kind of, we can pick up the ball with more questions at that point. But until then, I'm gonna leave it. We have about just a couple of minutes left here for any questions, and then we'll shut her down here. But thanks for joining us. I hope we got you interested in what automation can offer you.